So let's talk about UFC 158.
59.
I'm sorry, 59. I kind of I didn't put it over at the beginning of the show, and it's not one that I've been looking forward to, but it still has some fights that are worth something when it comes to the title picture. I think I'm most intrigued with Phil Davis because he's been this big prospect. He's kind of like a baseball prospect who blows through single A and double A and gets to triple A, and he's just kind of stuck. That's how I see Phil Davis. So actually, let's talk about what I expect to be the opening fight on the card. Jim Miller, who's traded wins and losses against some of the best guys in the lightweight division recently, losing Nate Diaz and Benson Henderson, but beating Melvin Gillard and Joe Lozon. And before that, he was on a huge winning streak against the lesser guys in the division. But he faces Pat Healy, who, is this his first UFC fight?
This is his first UFC fight since coming over from Strikeforce. He was to have fought Gilbert Melendez for the Strikeforce title, but both of those guys got hurt, and then unfortunately they announced they were going to fold Strikeforce starting in 2013. So that fight was out the window, but it was good enough. I think Pat had to fight on the last Strikeforce show, and it was like he had to win or he wasn't going to come into to UFC, and that would have just been an outrage in my opinion. I think Pat Healy has a chance in this fight. He's a bit of a scrappy-ish style guy. He's going to use his wrestling a lot, but then again, Jim Miller is maybe a bit more of a complete guy. He can do it anywhere, whether it's on the ground or with the striking. So if it goes to the ground, I give Miller a slight advantage. I think it could be Healy could surprise some people with maybe stuffing some of those takedowns, but I do lean Miller here with a decision here.
Yeah, I am agreeing with you on that. He actually fought, and this is according to Wikipedia, he fought Anthony Torres at UFC Fight Night 6 in 2006, and looks like he lost that fight. So he lost by rear naked choke. And the story of Healy's career is really, he had been a 500 fighter, fighting on the independent scene, up until he had a second fight in the WEC against Tiki Gozan, and then he got on a bit of a winning streak, but he lost the UFC fight, he lost a couple IFL fights, and then he lost his second Strikeforce fight to Josh Thompson. And since that time, he went on a 6-fight winning streak. He wasn't facing guys even Thompson's caliber, but that's what got him into the UFC, was just being on the win streak and being hot, from February of 2011 until now. And I don't know I've seen him fight live once, but it was an ugly fight with Josh Thompson, and I think Jim Miller is just a little too seasoned, and he's just a little too big. This is sort of what I was alluding to when I mentioned, Thompson, does he have a chance against some of these thicker, bigger wrestlers? And I think Miller is that kind of guy, the thicker, bigger wrestler who's just super athletic and talented as well. And I think Healy's going to get a little bit run over here, and like my kid likes to quote Uriah Faber, he's going to decision him up.
That probably will happen, but when you look at Healy's record, he's a gamer. I've seen him fight up here in Canada against a guy that's made sporadic appearances in Bellator recently, and Ryan the Real Deal Ford. They, had a couple of fights for when they were in welterweight for the MFC welterweight title. So he's a gamer, and he can be a little boring, but I think his striking is definitely vastly improved. And so I think he has a decent submission game too. So, he's someone that, on paper and, when you look at him and hear him talk, just, you don't get any interest to see him, but he's going to bring it. I think he's definitely going to bring it a lot more so than a lot of people are expecting him to. But I think Miller's just, too well-rounded to lose this fight.
So the next fight is Phil Davis, the quadruple A veteran of the UFC, against Vinny. How do you pronounce his last name?
Vinny Magalesh, the finalist from the Ultimate Fighter Season 8.
So he had 2 fights. He had the finale against Ryan Bader, and he got knocked out. And then he came back and faced Elliot Marshall, and he lost. And then he was done with the UFC, and he's fought his way back. He's only lost 1 fight since then. And, he's a submission wizard. He's a guy who is just exciting to watch when he gets on the ground because he's, doing constantly just moving into submission try after submission try. He's had 1 fight in the UFC since then, which he won by submission. And this is a kind of an interesting matchup because, Phil Davis, his style is just to kind of lay and pray. And I don't know if he can do that in this fight. I mean, I'm sure a lot of it is going to be based on how much stronger he is. But, at any opportunity off of his back, he could catch him for sure. What is your prediction on this one?
Well, this is the classic grappler versus wrestler matchup, kind of what the whole, basis of this sport has been built on. And I feel that, Davis had better really have improved his striking because that's just the one thing that has kind of been a bit of an issue for Vinny Magalesh. I mean, he has potential to knock you out or head kick you, but he wants to just take you down and use his submission skills. That was his bread and butter when he was on The Ultimate Fighter, and you can tell he's really, really proved it. Through his time out in Europe for his time in M1 before he became M1 Global's light heavyweight champion and before he sold that belt on eBay. So he wants to do that. I'm actually going to pick Magalesh. I think Magalesh is, the wrong style of fight for Phil Davis. I think Phil just wants to take him down and, look for submissions himself, but that's the wrong strategy to do against, a world-class BJJ guy. Vinny's been training with Chael for this, at least for the Ultimate Fighter this season. He's been, for the camp beforehand. So, I mean, he's a strong all-around fighter. I think, his first time in the UFC wasn't just the right time. It was wrong place, wrong time. I think he's gotten himself a lot better experience for the realm of being a pro, and I think he's going to handle it. I think the Phil Davis train has gone bye-bye. I think Phil Davis is a perfect guy to be a training partner and or coach, but I don't know if you want to have Phil Davis, put any money on Phil Davis here. I'm taking Vinny Magalesh, potentially by submission in the 2nd or 3rd round.
I am going a little bit of a safer route. I think Davis is going to win a boring decision. I think it's going to be takedown, let him up, takedown, let him up, takedown, let him up. And this is the kind of fight that I do not want to watch. I don't want to watch it. I hope that they prove me wrong and that this is actually super interesting, like you said, the wrestler versus the grappler. But I think Davis is way strong. I think he's also a little bit smarter than to stay on the ground, and maybe Vinny's a little more savvy than I'm giving him credit for, and can actually finagle a submission and getting Davis to come to the ground, like feigning a knockdown, like Verdum versus Fedor. But I fully expect the wrestling, sort of the fight that everybody kind of just throws up at, when it's going on. So that's what I expect. So we are split on that fight. Now, Roy Nelson against Czech Congo. This is like the ultimate gatekeeper fight to me. Both guys have been in the UFC now for a long time. They can beat guys who are just under their level, but when you put them against guys who are maybe slightly above their level, they lose like they should. And I think Nelson is probably the better fighter at this point, though Czech Congo is a wild card sometimes, where he looks great for a half of a round and then for whatever reason turns into a a dumb fighter for one. Like, you remember the fight against Cain Velasquez when Cain was coming up. For a little while there, Congo looked amazing, and then just looked like he had no idea what he was doing after that. So Nelson, Congo, are you taking Nelson here?
Yes, I definitely am taking Roy Nelson here. Czech's been in the UFC forever, but as you were saying, I mean, it's just like he's not going to beat anyone super impressive. And, his last fight was on that godforsaken awful show from Calgary, where he did not look impressive against a guy that he really should have just manhandled in Sean Jordan. And Roy Nelson, while I can see your point of him being a gatekeeper, I feel he is one of those gatekeepers, I guess, that I think could, get past that level. Obviously he wasn't gonna, he had the toughness to hang with Junior Dos Santos, but Dos Santos had the striking and stuff of that nature. But yeah, I feel I'm honestly leaning with Roy's power here. I think Czech's chin is not the same as it once was, so I'm leaning for a Roy Nelson first round TKO or KO.
No, I agree with you. I think maybe it'll come in the second round, maybe, but I mean, it wouldn't surprise me to see it so early. And I see where you're coming from when you talk about Nelson. He is maybe the upper, to use a wrestling term, he's like an upper mid-carder. But, like, look at the guys that he's lost to. Like, Fabricio Verdum, that's a guy who's probably right at the same spot as him. Frank Mir, if he wanted to do something in the UFC, that's a guy who he would have to beat, because it's not like Frank Mir is a world beater at this point. So losing to, and I was at that show, and that show was terrible. And I was disappointed in Roy because I thought he was going to be able to do something with Mir, but Mir was just too strong. You mentioned Junior Dos Santos. I didn't expect him to beat Junior, and he didn't. But his wins have been his wins have been against guys he should have beat. Stefan Struve, Brendan Shaw. At least back then, at that point, Stefan Struve. Maybe if they fought again, it could be a different story. But Brendan Schaub in the Ultimate Fighter finale, we knew that was happening. He beat Crow Cop. He beat an aging Crow Cop. He beat Dave Herman. He beat Mitrione. So he's beaten all these guys who he's definitely supposed to beat, and he lost to everybody who he's supposed to lose to. So, until he beats somebody that I think is a little bit better than he is, or is actually favored, I'm going to think of him the same way. And which is, he's a good guy to have on the roster because he provides a challenge. Like, if you can beat Roy Nelson, then you're probably in the mix. And if he wants to be in the mix, he's going to have to beat someone, who's a little bit higher than him. So we both agree on that fight. We both think that Chick is going to find a way to make a mistake and probably get knocked out. I think it's going to be one of those, Roy kind of feints the double leg and comes over with the overhand right kind of knockouts. And that is actually a fight I'm okay with, I think, because we're going to get the finish. Another fight that I'm okay with, mostly because of who's involved, is Michael Bisping, who we last saw in a disappointing loss. Had to be disappointing for him, losing to Vitor Belfort, which was, a fight that he was going to be able to, if he was able to win, he was probably going to get a shot with Anderson Silva. Didn't happen. He looked really bad, actually. Vitor, throwing kicks and craziness in Brazil, with that fan base who desperately wanted to see him win. He got the knockout win. And Alan Belcher, who has, when I think of Alan Belcher, I guess I think of him more from the earlier part of his UFC career where he was just trading wins back and forth. But, he has put on a bit of a win streak as he's gotten later in his career. I thought, the fight against Paul-Harris was actually really impressive. I did not think he was going to win that fight. And losing to Okami, nothing to be shamed of, because Okami just makes people look really bad. But do you think? I think most people would favor Bisping just because he's fought the better competition. He's lost to Chael Sonnen and Vanderlei, and he's beaten some guys like Brian Stan, who you would say is graded a little bit higher than Alan Belcher. But do you think Belcher has a chance here to pull off the upset?
Well, everyone has a chance, I think, but do I think it'll happen? I really don't think so. Belcher, I think Belcher should be, first of all, really, really happy he's even fighting. He almost had a career-ending eye injury a couple years ago. I totally forgot that Okami fight had happened. But if the fight goes to the ground, which I know is what Belcher would like to have happen, but I have to give Bisping credit. It's not as easy as it sounds. Bisping, for a British guy, has probably got some of the best takedown defense for any of the European guys. But if it goes to the ground, Bisping could be in a little bit of trouble. As we saw with Belcher heel hooking the heel hook master in Paul Juarez. Belcher's got some really strong jiu-jitsu skills for a guy that can rattle off impressive TKOs or head kicks and stuff like that. But I think the big fight experience, I'm gonna lean with Bisping. That's kind of got to be a factor. And I think Bisping's gotten into Belcher's head a bit. Like Belcher said some stuff like, "I'm gonna give Bisping a free shot with my hands down," which is. Like, no, you're not. Stupid. But so, yeah, I'm going to lean with Bisping just on the big, fight experience. And I think that it's going to be tougher for Belcher to get the takedowns on Bisping. And I think he's going to, win that way. I think it'll be a decision victory for Bisping. But all in all, I'm leaning with the count.
All right. So I agree with you. I think the first round or the first two rounds could be close. I think Belcher's an easy guy to root for when he is the underdog. But I think Bisping's talent and just his overall, just his ability to fight smartly, it's rare. And I think the Belfort fight was one of those rare occasions where Bisping gets sucked into a style that doesn't work for him. I think he understands how to win decisions. The Chael Sonnen fight was so close, and that could have went either way. So I'm not even going to really count that as a bad style for him. But he's usually really smart in these cases, so I think he'll win a decision. And though I think it could be pretty interesting early on because. But Belcher's a guy who's going to go a little bit, and he's going to challenge Bisping in certain spots and make it pretty uncomfortable for him. But I do think that Bisping will prevail. So, the main event, the fight that had weeks and weeks of The Ultimate Fighter behind it, which was one of the best Ultimate Fighters in recent memory to me. They really changed the style of the show, made it a lot more sort of behind-the-scenes, documentary-ish versus shenanigans like had been, the previous seasons. Jon Jones and Chael Sonnen came off very friendly. I think Sonnen came off in a better light when it came to the coaching aspects. He was able to make some really inspirational speeches that... I think a lot of people just thought, wow, what he's saying makes a lot of sense. And Jones didn't really have that many moments. Now, he may have had some, but maybe we didn't see him. He made some bad decisions when it came to fighters, facing off against each other when he had the matchmaking part based on a win from his team. I didn't see a lot of smack talk between the guys. They didn't really do a great job of setting up the fight, when it comes to the promos and thinking back to Rashad Evans and Quentin Jackson when those guys absolutely couldn't stand each other. This was not like that. And it wasn't even, Uriah Faber and Dominic Cruz who don't really like each other. It wasn't even, like that. It was just two guys who were very gentlemanly about their disagreements, and they mentioned time and time again in the show, I really wanted to hate Chael, but I just couldn't. And Chael would say, I think there was a Thanksgiving speech where Chael was like, said something to the effect of, it's really hard to dislike this guy. the recent buildup has been based around Chael, doing his wrestling promo stuff, and then Jon Jones calling Chael out for steroids. Now, I thought Jon Jones really dropped the ball, not this past weekend, but the weekend before on the UFC show, the Ultimate Fighter show, where he and Chael, were trying to set up the fight a little bit, and Jones just did not want to be there. Looked like a dick. Just, I don't know if he was going through like something bad. I don't know if he just was grumpy from weight cutting. I don't know what the deal was, but he absolutely did not. He didn't come. He didn't look like he wanted to be there. So there was that. It just looked really bad. So trying to sell this fight, he now comes back this last week with the steroid accusation stuff, which that's been out there. Chael was the TRT guy, and he has technically low testosterone, I guess, because of something or other. And now we get the fight. I guess my only real question to you is this fight going to be competitive at all?
I really don't think it's going to be that competitive, as if you're a week out from your fight, I don't think you're going to be hosting the show on Fox. Really? I think really it's just, Chael helping out the UFC and get, a buy rate and trying to help get Jon Jones over, kind of like a great heel's supposed to do in the world of wrestling. You do all the build-up, you go in there and you do the job and you get the guy over and, you both are off for the better. But, this would be Chael's third job in a row. So I don't think that. I really think it's going to be a one-round fight. I think Jones is just going to be too much. But, Chael could be, better than what we're thinking. Chael, as you were saying from The Ultimate Fighter, kind of his whole shtick has died, in my opinion, because he came off as such a nice guy and a great coach that, every time I see him now and he cuts those promos, it's just like you can just see him trying too hard now. But before it was just like the button would turn on, but you kind of believe in him a little bit. I don't know. It's just a little difference in seeing him from The Ultimate Fighter. I agree with you that Jon Jones was a dick, but I think that added help to, help draw some intrigue in this fight. Like, wow, Jon Jones really does hate Chael and stuff like that. Maybe something like that. But all in all, I don't think it'll be that competitive of a fight. But then again, when you look at this card, I think the undercard could be really, really exciting. With, the guy that they're trying to make the next one of their Mexican superstars, and Eric Perez. On there,
he's the one that comes out with the mask, right?
Yes, the lucha mask, Eric Perez. You have the guy who I think it was the Tough 15 or the Tough 16 finale, who had the 3 suplex on Vic Pichel, Rustamov Kalbadov taking on Yancy Medeiros in what should be a pretty interesting fight. Just based on, you're going to see those highlights of the 3 German suplexes as his finish. And I think a pretty good women's fight in Sheila Gaff, Sarah McMahon. Sarah McMahon, another, Olympian. And I think she's really the one, I think, that can take the title from Rousey, personally.
There's actually a fight that probably should be on the FX card. Leonard Garcia and Cody McKenzie.
Yes.
Both of those guys bring it every time.
Not sure what they're thinking there.
So, that one's interesting. They got, they have the Strike Force fight with...
I think that one needs to be the Facebook fight. Yeah. No offense to Jean Vellante. Jean Vellante is a gamer. He'll be in an exciting fight. He'll, put it all out there, win, lose, or draw. And OSP, I think there's potential that they see him maybe being a contender down the line, just for how tall he is, and he fights a pretty good kickboxing style. But they don't have much of a track record unless you followed Strikeforce.
Yeah.
So why not throw them as the last Facebook fight?
Yeah, and I think they just had probably one too many fights on the FX card already, and that one just kind of lost the shortest straw. I am interested in seeing the McMahon fight. I am so intrigued by the women in the UFC. I love the Strikeforce women's division. I'm intrigued by the UFC women's division. This Tough that's coming up in the fall, I'm all in because I want to see the women fighting. I just think it's sort of like it's just such a new thing, and it feels organic. It feels like, these women are ready, and this is not like I enjoy women's sports or anything. Like, I'm not a WNBA fan, though. I have a lot of respect for women athletes because that they are they peak at a certain point in their athletic career that they're just not as tall, they're just not as big, they're just not as strong as the male counterparts, but they are absolutely hungry and work their asses off. And if you watch the Olympics, the women's basketball team, like, they're just so ahead of all of the rest of the country, sort of like where the NBA was 10 years ago or whatever. Like, they're just so good and they're so well practiced. And so the women athletes, to make it at this level, you're not doing it a lot of the times for the money. You're doing it for the love, and you can definitely see it in the battles that they have. The Miesha Tate fight the last week was awesome. I wanted to see Miesha get a little bit more time against Kat Zingano. I wanted to see if she could come back, but man, that fight was just, it wasn't a technical masterpiece. It was just it was a brawl. It was just it was a slobber knocker, as JR would say. So I am interested in Sarah McMahon because I think there's a lot riding on her as a contender. And so there's a little bit more pressure on her than there is generally on some of these other women who are just kind of trying to get eyeballs. Like, I think a lot of people like you think that she's got a legitimate shot because of her background. And so I think there's there's going to be some eyeballs on her. Anytime you get to watch the women fight, I think it's pretty cool. It's sort of like almost like a special thing because there's so few women's fights. So I'm in with you on that too. And just to go back to Sonnen and Jones, I agree with you. I don't really think this is going to be super competitive. The one thing that I do wonder, though, we think Anderson Silva is probably the greatest fighter in the game today, and Chael Sonnen, in 2 fights with Anderson Silva, and in that second fight, we were only talking really 1 round, but he was able to put Anderson on the defensive like nobody has, and he had a great game plan. He believed in his own ability to take punches so that he could get inside and land some punches. He tagged Anderson Silva with a lot of right hands, which set up his takedown. And I think John Jones is going to fight a lot smarter than Anderson Silva did. I think the first fight, Anderson probably didn't take Chael a whole lot seriously. John Jones doesn't seem like he's the kind of fighter who is going to be sort of a renegade and get out there and throw. Like, he's a very cautious and smart fighter. So maybe Chael, maybe it doesn't really matter what kind of game plan Chael has because Jones is gonna set the tempo no matter what and not allow himself to be on the defensive or to sort of be out of pocket. But there is something to be said for Chael that he put Anderson Silva through hell for 5 rounds in a fight, and Anderson Silva is someone we consider the best fighter in the game. So that's if I'm trying to sell this fight as a competitive sport, as a competitive battle, that would be my argument. But like you, I think it's going to end. I think it'll end. I think Chael will last until the 3rd round, and I think Jones will finish him similarly like he finished Rampage, where he just takes a tough guy down and beats him up, and takes a tough guy down and beats him up. And by the 3rd round, you see a guy who's on his back, who you're not used to seeing in that position. And it's probably going to be a little heartbreaking for Chael fans to see him. But I say 3rd round TKO, John Jones. And I don't know who else they put with him because he's kind of out of contenders as well. So we will we'll see what happens there. So UFC 159 this weekend. We will have a preview up, and we will also do the play-by-play more than likely. I'm not 100% sure yet if I'm going to see this live.